All right, so here we are on YouTube Live again for my weekly show that's focused on career clarity and career crossroads. So this week, our topic is, actually just right here, summarized it. I mean, if you can read it quickly, then that's basically what it is. But basically, I realized that last week I actually didn't turn on the text box, so people, even if you're watching, they can't really drop in and ask questions for Q&A and so on. So I decided to, I fixed the problem now, so you should be able to comment and I should be able to see your comments. So the topic today is really focused on the question of navigating career crossroads in your 30s and how to find that clarity in your 30s. And I came up with a very, very simple process for you to really get that understanding on how you can navigate these crossroads. And the very first step is to do your research. I mean, it's like kind of like a no-brainer. Boom, like I'm stuck. So what should I do? Well, first thing you should do is do your research. And when I say research, what do I mean by that? Well, there's a number of things by research. First of all, you got to see what's out there, because at the end of the day, if you don't know what's out there, it's terrifying. You always think about like the unknown, and like it's impossible to navigate things that you don't know about. And so essentially you got to do your research to understand what are the options out there. It's kind of like, I've used this analogy several times, but it's the best analogy that I know. It's like, think about it like if it's pitch black outside and you have no idea what's outside, it is a terrible idea to step out because you might walk off a cliff. However, if you know what's out, if you have a torch and you have some light that illuminates the surrounding areas, and as you navigate the process, it's like, oh wait, it's not as scary, right? And if it's in like broad daylight, because you've done so much research that you know exactly what are the roads in front of you, what are the options in front of you, then basically it's not going to be scary at all, because it's just essentially walking straight out and you know what to expect. You've done the work and you've done the research. And so it brings me to my second point. And it's that the best way to do research is to network. And when I say network, I know everyone's like, oh, another platitude, right? Well, when you look at networking, there's a real science behind it. And in sociology, we have something called network theory, right? Where we look at how do networks work? What is the best way to network, right? And one of the best ways to network is actually founded by a Stanford sociologist called Mark Granovetter back in the 1970s. And he has an idea called strong ties and weak ties. And what that is strong ties is the idea that something is, there are people that we see on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, but we see a lot. And these are people who we have strong ties with. And because we have strong ties with them, and the reason why we have strong ties with them is because we traverse the same networks. We see each other all the time, and we share a common space, and we share a common work, and we share basically a common rhythm in life. And those types of people, they're great if you want to, if for solidarity and for comfort and so on. However, they're not exactly very good for networking, because they know your exact situation, they know about you, and they have certain preconceptions about you. However, Mark Granovetter argues that there's something called weak ties, and he just came out in this paper called The Strength of Weak Ties. And what that is that weak ties are actually people who you don't see on a constant basis. There's a relationship there, but you don't see each other a lot. And the best way to network for figuring out your next steps is to reach out to these people who you have weak ties with, because they see different things. They fundamentally experience a different life on a daily basis than you. And that's why it's a major benefit then when you are focused on the networking process to look for these weak ties people and to talk to them and just to see hey, what are my options? What can I do to navigate this process? I'm looking for XYZ, and can you help me with this? And that's why it's so important when you're networking to focus on people who you have a warm relationship with, who you haven't talked to for a while, because they fundamentally see different things from you. And when you reach out to weak ties, then your network is so much stronger. If you reach out to strong ties, what happens is you're telling your best friend, or you're telling your good colleagues, close colleagues, who are probably your coworkers, who will probably share the same network as you, and they're not going to see too much that's different from what you see. And that's why it's not very helpful to reach out to strong ties. In fact, that's why when you go on a networking spree for your career exploration, the best thing to do is to reach out to your weak ties, secondary networks, and people who primary networks, but they're not like your first tier of friends, kind of like your second or third tier of friends who see things who different from you, who traverse a different social circle. And that is much more effective than going to network with your best friends and your homies, because that's not exactly networking. And based on that, when you network with these weak ties, the best question to ask at the very end is, hey, the best question to ask at the very beginning is not, what do you think I should do? Because that's irresponsible. You shouldn't really put that burden on someone else. That's your responsibility. That's why it's important when you walk into that meeting with your weak tie to carry something what we call a career statement. And the career statement is kind of like, what is the objective? What do you want as your end goal for your career? You want to stay in Toronto, right? For me, I'll probably want to stay in Toronto for the most part. You want to have a high income, or maybe you want work-life balance, or you want work from home benefits, or you want to work for a meaningful mission, right? You need to sort these things out so that you can help the weak tie to help them help you, right? And the best way to do that is to have a very short paragraph called a career statement, which summarizes what exactly you're looking for. The more precise, the better. And if the weak tie has something in their network, they're like, hey, actually, what you're describing sounds awful lot like XYZ experience that I have, in my network. Would you like me to connect? Would you like me to connect you guys, right? That would be an opportunity. Another thing that you got to ask is, hey, and in those situations at the very end, you can also ask, hey, based on my career statement, if they have nothing to give you, you can ask them, based on my career statement, do you know anybody who may know something that is similar to what I'm describing to you right now? And with that, they are much more likely to make that connection. And whenever someone is willing to refer you to a connection, that increases your chance of someone saying yes. So if you do a cold network outreach on email or LinkedIn, the acceptance rate is typically around 10 to 20%, right? It's not very high. And so that's why when you do a cold outreach to network on LinkedIn, the best thing to do is to reach out to like 50 people at your target, because the likelihood of all of them answering is like close to none. And essentially you probably only want, if you have like 2 to 5 people answer, you're golden, right? So what happens is basically you gotta reach out to those people and ask them, hey, is there a secondary network that you can connect me to? So after you do that, you have a lot more data points to work with. You have a lot more, a much stronger network to work with. And then to follow, the next step is to do that research and figure out how to make the pivot. And when you make a pivot, you have to be sure that it's a pivot that you want to do, because the thing is, and today's theme is, the 30s, right? And what the research shows is that when you are in your 30s, people, job hopping as a practice is much less accepted. It's not as accepted as, job hopping in your 20s. In your 30s, people are expecting stability, whether it's in your life stage for, establishing a family, or for just the expectations itself. They expect some form of stability. And that's why if you are looking to, just make a pivot for the sake of making a pivot to get out of a situation, I would highly recommend against that, because that would look like, job hopping stations throughout your resume. In fact, the best thing to do in your 30s is to gain that clarity and figure out exactly what you want to do. And research and networking is essential for that, right? And as I said, that career statement is also key as well. So make a meaningful make a meaningful pivot, right? You gotta stop thinking of it as hopping. You gotta think of it as pivoting to the right position in a meaningful manner that upskills you appropriately, that puts you in the right position to succeed, that helps you, that lets you work on projects that you think are going to be super important for you 5 to 10 years down the road. And that's really what a meaningful pivot is, as opposed to, job hopping. And essentially it's the same thing, right? You're switching jobs, but that the end goal is much clearer in a pivot versus, a hop. And the fourth and final step, I would say, is to really trust your intuition. And the reason why you gotta trust your intuition is this, right? I just found this out recently, my wife told me, and it's that, did you know your brain actually has fewer neurons than your gut. Like literally, it has literally fewer neurons than your gut. Your gut has, and the bacteria in your gut, in total is more than your whole body put together, right? And it's crazy when you think about it that way, because it's essentially saying that when you say that I have a gut feeling, I have my instincts, I feel butterflies in my stomach, and I don't feel so well in terms of just nauseous and so on. It's because there are actually neurons in your gut as well. Now, what's the actual mechanism of them? I don't know. But the fact that there's like neurons, which are like brain stuff in your stomach, is actually fascinating. So, and there's a lot of and there's something to be said about instinct, right? And when we look at research based out of Harvard Kennedy School, they did some research on looking at managers and looking at the instinct of the managers who behave based on instinct and behave based on logic. And they found that a lot of times it's not too far off. In fact, people who work based on instinct usually do better, especially if it's on top of data, right? You can't just run off of instinct all the time, but you got to run off of data as well. When you put those two together, you have a real powerful force of knowing what's the right thing to do or what's the wrong thing to do, right? And that's why it's important to do everything based on research first. Start out with research and then move on to working through your network, right? And the networking is also part of research. It's an iterative, and what we call an iterative and recursive process, right? You go and do it in a cyclical manner. You do it once, and then you go back to the research, you network, and then you go back to the research, you network, research, right? Because not everything is Googleable. And also, when you network, make sure you're asking questions that are well thought out. And what that means is anything that is not Googleable, because anything that's Googleable, you shouldn't be even asking in a networking kind of situation. And so, based on that, I'm going to summarize the 4 points that I have, right? Number 1, you got to do your research. Number 2, you got to network the right way. Number 3, you got to have a meaningful pivot and an outcome in mind that is meaningful. And number 4 is to really follow that gut intuition because it tells you much more than you think it does. And so that's basically a wrap for my my live today in terms of what I'm offering, in terms of the ideas. And I'm wondering if anyone's got any questions. And if you got questions, just feel free to shoot it in the chat, and I'll be glad to answer them. And if there's no questions, that's perfectly fine as well. I'm just gonna chill for a bit. I mean, what else am I supposed to do, right? So if there's no questions, I'll wait for 10 more seconds. If there's nothing, I'm gonna peace out. And I wish you to have a great day, and I'll see you around, right? And that's 10 seconds. All right, cool. Everyone, hope you enjoyed this live. Short one, but a good one. Okay? Wish to see you around. Take care. Have a good one.